After Biography, there are 2 more WWE shows airing each and every Sunday night. The last one I don't think you and I have bothered with at all, nor will.
No.
But the Rivals show, I was about to call it Rivalry again. The Rivals show aired again this week, focusing on the Undertaker and Kane feud.
Yes, and remember last week I'd said, well, they advertised those, and one of them is going to be the incomparable, immortal feud between Stephanie McMahon and Brie Bella. I said, so we're going to have to skip one of those. Wait, the Bellas have something on the A&E producers now, I guess. But this episode was on the Undertaker and Kane rivalry. And obviously I was there for that and involved in part of it, so I was interested. And also, you know, despite what especially Mayor Jacobs has been saying in public lately, I always thought a lot of Glenn when he was just Glenn and Kane before he became a politician and revealed he was a lunatic. So, and again, these programs are better than the WWE's modern day wrestling programs. So to see the good wrestling and find out more about the wrestlers you like to watch, you got to watch the documentaries. And the early part of this was somewhat lifted in truncated, how you like that word, truncated version from the Taker biography, because they had to tell you who the Undertaker was briefly to make this program as a standalone make sense. And so, and all these talking heads, I mean, they're all A&E WWE productions. So all the talking heads, they got to do multiple comments on multiple subjects. That's why you're seeing a lot of the same people pop up on different programs. And that's understandable when, you know, you're doing a variety of topics, same production company, and shooting everything, all the raw footage at around the same amount of time, or around the same time period. I love the footage. I love hearing the guys talk. I love the production of these programs. But again, they do somewhat rewrite history. So on this one, instead of, everybody should watch this if you like Undertaker or Kane, or, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, especially WWF. Instead of just going blow by blow on the program, I thought we'd talk about some of the things they left out on this one, because as soon as they've established who the Undertaker was, and then they've got Bruce talking about, of course, he had a brother, and enter Kane, right? And it was Bruce's idea for Undertaker to have a brother. I'm not, and never have denied that. And, you know, Bruce was wrapped up at, he loved Undertaker. He loved Mark as a person, loved the Undertaker gimmick. He was the original manager, as we heard on the biography. So he was invested in wanting not only to do his job, which was, you know, come up with good shit for the program, just like mine was, but also he's invested in that Undertaker gimmick. So, and he was very passionate. I think that's how he sold Vince on it. He was very, and you could tell with his comments, he's very passionate about the Undertaker's brother being Kane, the first man to commit murder, blah, blah, blah. And the problem was with this documentary, and I know they've only got an hour on this and they can't go into everything, but they didn't go into the fact that they had almost ruined Glenn Jacobs' career, and Vince was on the verge of firing him before Kane came up. And it's been a few years since I've told that story, but for the sake of the newer listeners, older cult members, please bear with me on some of this. But I would think everybody in the pantheon of bad gimmicks remembers Dr. Isaac Yankem and or the fake Diesel. If you didn't see them, if you didn't experience them in real time, at least you've heard about them, and people still to this day mock a lot about those things. I was still in Knoxville when Vince gave Glenn the Isaac Yankem thing. They had the match. Undertaker and Kane, Undertaker and Glenn, Unabomb, had the Smoky Mountain Wrestling match August 4th of 1995. It's at my Super Bowl of Wrestling. And that was obviously meant to be Glenn's audition. Taker loved him from the start, saw tons of, potential. But then when Vince gets hold of him. I've said this before. I don't know it for a fact, but I bet you Vince had a dentist appointment that he didn't appreciate or like or have a good time at. And he calls me on the phone. He was thrilled. And Vince McMahon only called me on the phone when I wasn't up there working for him directly, I think 3 times. And this encompasses all of OVW and all of the Smoky Mountain years, everything, like 3 times. And one of them was to just be thrilled about the gimmick that he had given Glenn Jacobs. He said, he's going to be an evil dentist. And my fucking heart fell in my stomach. Dr. Isaac Yankem. And oh, God. And then I saw it on TV. He even had the vignettes they did. Remember Lawler and the doctors? Because it was Lawler's dentist is how he's introduced. The vignettes in the dentist office, and Isaac Yankem has the rotten teeth, sort of a takeoff on Richard Kiel in Jaws, or Jaws in James Bond, and, you know, the whole evil dentist thing. Vince actually had a VHS of those vignettes done and sent down to me. He was so over the moon about it. And it was bloody fucking rotten. And do you remember how long did Isaac Yankem last?
Couple months? 3 months at the most, maybe?
Maybe.
It was the build up to SummerSlam, right?
Well, God, I've put that part out of my mind.
Oh, no, it wasn't SummerSlam.
No, it wasn't SummerSlam because by that point in time, he was about to be fake Diesel.
No.
So it was... What?
He was Isaac Yankem first, then fake Diesel.
Yes, but which SummerSlam were you talking about?
No, I'm wrong about SummerSlam.
Okay, well, but I'm saying the summer of '97, he had already been SummerSlam '96. He had already been Isaac Yankem, and I believe he was about to be the fake Diesel, if I'm not mistaking my years. But the point being, Isaac Yankem didn't last very long. So then they've got Glenn, and and Jim Ross was a big proponent of his, and Bruce was, and I was. Vince wasn't seeing it because now his gimmick that he liked didn't work. So now he's getting that feeling. But then the fake Razor and Diesel came up. And the only reason that they made Glenn the fake Diesel because he's the only one they had that they could do that was that tall. And that came about. I've told this story. We had a writers' meeting at Vince's house, and it broke up, and I went home, and the next day I flew out to Oklahoma because I was still managing Vader because this was 1996, and I think we did Oak City, and then on a Saturday morning or whatever, Saturday I went into Tulsa and went in the building, and all the boys had watched whatever was Live Wire that morning, whatever program was on Saturday morning. And they're running up to me because I'm a member of the creative committee. And what, Razor and Diesel are coming back? I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? They announced on TV this morning, Razor and Diesel are coming back from WCW. I said, that's insane. That's not going to happen. They're under contract. What are you talking about? Well, it was announced. So I get on the phone. I call fucking Bruce. I'm like, Bruce, I'm here. The guys are asking me, Hall and Nash are coming back. No, not Hall and Nash, Razor and Diesel. I said, what are you fucking talking about? Sometime after we left, in the 24-hour period, we left the writers' meeting, and before the Livewire episode aired on Saturday morning, Vince had decided, well, Razor and Diesel are my gimmicks. I created them. I've got those names trademarked. I'm just going to make 2 other guys Razor and Diesel. And...
Well, can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Because I don't know the answer off the top of my head, and you may not either, but was this right around a period of time, too, that he was suing WCW because of Scott Hall, that he was doing too much of Razor on TV?
I think so. And he probably, okay, well, I'll just put them back on my TV, and I've got it copyrighted, blah, blah, blah. But the point, they found old Rick Bogner, the guy from Canada, to be Razor. And he wasn't a bad Razor, but it was obviously a rip-off copy and was never going to get over. But Glenn was, And that's where the 5 moves of doom came from. They told me, they said, okay, go to the studio, get in the ring, and teach these guys how to be Razor and Diesel. Well, Rick Bogner had already been working for a while, and Razor Ramon did a lot more shit, so that was easier, and he was fine. But I watched numerous Kevin Nash Diesel matches that I got from the studio on tape, and I wrote down all the moves. Knee in the corner, back elbow in the corner, jackknife power bomb, big boot, choke slam, hair flip. And I added the hair flip to make it more than the 5 moves of doom. And that thing sucked too, because the fans were insulted that, we expected them to believe, or to buy this shit. And that flopped also. And at that point, I was in a writer's meeting, and Vince actually said these words. I hate it about Glenn Jacobs, but he just doesn't have the killer instinct. Probably going to have to let him go. And what the fuck? And, when he would get that way, you couldn't talk him out of it because he'd made up his mind. But fortunately, Kane had to be 7 feet tall like his brother. And that's what Vince said, we'll give him one more chance. And the reason why that Glenn was not impressing anyone was not because of anything that he was doing wrong. It was because he had been put in 2 gimmicks, in 2 positions that not only did he know was rotten, but that had nothing to do with him. He didn't know how to fucking be a wrestling dentist. He obviously didn't want to act like Kevin Nash Light under another name. And he was uncomfortable, and he was embarrassed in some cases to be out there, but just uncomfortable. And that's what was preventing him from showing what he could do. And bear in mind, when he debuted as Kane, he'd been in the business not quite 4 years. And the time that he was signed to the WWF, in between those gimmicks, they just left him off because they didn't have anything to do. So he had very little experience, but he was determined and wanted to do something. And I had to sit down and tell him. It's sometimes when Vince would say shit about guys, I wouldn't go tell him because, Vince blows hot and cold sometimes. But with that, I said, Glenn, he's saying you need the killer instinct or you're out of here. And I know it's because you haven't had anything to work with, but now this is the deal. And you need to make this work, and he did. Paul Bearer was great in teasing it. And when you go back and look at Paul's heel stuff that he was doing when he turned on Taker and with Kane and everything, before it just got they rewrote the backstory 100 times. Paul Bearer was great. I loved Percy's shit because it was preposterous, but yet you could believe him because he was kind of preposterous as a person. I'm not saying anything bad. I'm saying that he was a character, as Mama Cornette would say. Percy was. So if you knew him in person, it wasn't that far-fetched. Anyway.
And he really was a big part of this whole documentary, even though he wasn't there. I mean, every clip they showed, he was in the middle of.
It's because he was the thing that held him together. He was the common thread. Paul Bearer had always been at Undertaker's side, carried the urn that gave him his power or whatever. Then, when he turns on Undertaker, because now we find out that he's been responsible for Undertaker not knowing his brother was alive and blah, blah, blah. And I know this is preposterous, right? But a lot of things are preposterous when you get the guys that can carry it off. It becomes more posterous, less preposterous. Some more rewriting history. Sean has gone in modern times with the theory or the story that, well, yeah, we wanted more room in the cage to do some stuff. That's the way Vince sold it to them, because Vince was concerned, well, they won't like a change in the cage. I said, from that big blue fucking thing that kills everybody that runs into it, I'm sure they'll be thrilled. But I've told this story before, so I'll not linger on it. But we were presented with a situation where what Vince McMahon wanted was for Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker to wrestle in the main event of the pay-per-view in October in St. Louis for the title. The Undertaker would not win. Shawn would go on to the following month's Survivor Series, and what Vince thought, well, not for the title there, but Shawn would beat The Undertaker, and then Shawn would go on to win the title from Bret Hart at Survivor Series in November. So Shawn and Taker is the main event of the pay-per-view, where the heel's going to go over, especially over The Undertaker, and Undertaker is not going to come back and get any rebuttal on Shawn Michaels. So there has to be a way to lead Undertaker away from that situation. That's where Kane comes in. We've been teasing it. Kane will make his debut. He will cost The Undertaker the match against Michaels. Michaels will go on to win the title the following month at the Survivor Series from Bret, we thought. And Undertaker has a reason for not continuing after Shawn Michaels and still not looking like a pussy, because he's got other things on his mind. That was the deal. How do we make that so nobody looks bad and we get Shawn and Undertaker both into their new programs out of this? So, since Shawn and Taker had been going back and forth over the period of time they'd been there, this needs to be a blow-off match, and Kane needs to make an impact. That's when Vince had said cage match, and that's when I said, well, since we've had a bunch of cage matches, and I didn't say to Vince this, but I always hated the WWF cage matches because escape the cage, out the door, over the top. Well, that's the stupidest thing that's ever been done in wrestling. Because when you have an escape the cage match, there's no reason to have the cage. The cage was made, the cage was invented, the cage was popularized. No way in, no way out. We're going to settle it one-on-one. Somebody's got to win. WWF cage matches, because they just sucked. I said, what about this, Vince? Let's change the method of the cage match, because I said, since Kane is going to come in, we've already established that you can get in and out of our cages. What about if you give them a cage where the whole idea is it's impossible for anybody to get in or out until a winner is declared? It's going to be a showdown. And he raises the eyebrow. He's intrigued. And all I did was researched a couple of different kinds of cage matches. The cage in Memphis they used in the mid to late 80s. That was so big it didn't set on the apron of the ring. It went all the way around the ring, and you could fight outside on the floor inside it. You could come off the top rope, whatever, because it was bigger, and that's the reason they did that cage in Memphis, was because that's when they had Tommy Rich hide under the ring and come out in the Austin Idol Jerry Lawler match. Fuck Lawler, they shaved Lawler's head. They needed the cage to be bigger so that Tommy could come out from under the ring, because nobody had thought of, nor did they have the budget to, at that time, cut a hole in the fucking ring and crawl up through that, right?
It also meant the fans had to climb a higher cage when they tried to get in.
I was about to say it also, when they were shaving Lawler's head and the people were rioting and trying to kill the heels, they had farther to fucking climb up to get in there. And I researched from the War Games, I said, put a roof on it. Because that way, even if somebody climbs up, they can't get in or out. And Vince is still intrigued. But how does Kane make a difference? That I researched from Kevin Sullivan's booking in Continental Wrestling in Knoxville in I think it was Christmas night of 1987, would have been. They debuted Doug Furnas, the world's strongest man, University of Tennessee football star. To save the baby faces who were getting slaughtered in the cage, he came out and ripped the door off the hinges. That was Doug Furnas's debut in wrestling. And that was a thing that I had put in my mind that I said, one of these days, I'll be able to use that, not in Knoxville, because everybody would have seen it. So I pitched that. Kane comes out, jerks the door off the impenetrable cage, becomes a monster, gives Undertaker his own move and leaves, and Shawn pins him. Shawn goes on to Bret. Now Undertaker's busy with Kane. And that got everybody out just into the directions they needed to go just perfectly. And so, again, Vince was like, well, I think they'll like the change in the cage. I said, I'm sure they will. So I guess that Vince went and sold Shawn and Taker, saying, hey, guys, you can come off the top and you can fight outside and you can have more room. But they didn't have any idea of what the fuck the cage match was going to be until Vince told them, because we just thought of it. It was me and Vince and shit staying in the room. And I think Bruce was still there at that point, because he was about to be moved over to the office in talent relations also again. So, and that's what happened. And that's, the match that came off. And it was a brilliant, introduction to Kane, and everybody did what they were supposed to do for once, perfectly and without argument in Michael's case, because he was winning. But then when Kane showed up, you saw the clip where Glenn said that he and Mark were thinking Jason Voorhees for what Kane would look like. And actually he meant Michael Myers, because Jason, Friday the 13th, he didn't really have a look. He was down at the bottom of the fucking river and lake and came up and pulled everybody down, right?
Well, he didn't get the hockey mask until the third movie. The second movie, he was kind of a freak in the shadows.
Yes, and Glenn had already been wearing a hockey mask when he was Unabomb, and that wasn't everybody knows, because this was Glenn. Like I said, I wanted to take interest in this, and also the way that it was going, and with Bruce being, enthusiastic about selling it. I said, okay. I said, what would Kane look like? And remember, I'm not working for Bill Watts here. This is some ridiculous shit coming up, but I'm working for Vince McMahon. I'm trying to get in the flavor of the party, right? I'm trying to get in the scheme of things. I said, all right. Kane's brother was burned horribly and disfigured in the fire at the funeral home. Everybody thought he was dead. That's why Undertaker hadn't known about him, but Paul Bearer did, and Paul Bearer is the one that's been taking care of him. That's the story that we're telling. So what about this? And you should have seen Vince's face when I said some of this, because I don't know that he's ever seen the movie Halloween. We have proof that he's been to a movie recently, but Halloween's my favorite horror movie of modern times. So we know that Michael Myers escaped from the mental institution, fucking killed a gas station attendant and got his jumpsuit, and then broke into a store and got a Halloween mask, and it's the William Shatner mask from Star Trek. That's what he wears in the movie. The flavor of it, to me, seemed like that if this guy has been held prisoner somewhere in solitary by Paul Bearer, that he'd just have maybe kind of threadbare, bland, dark-colored shirt and pants. But he would have, in the flavor of Michael Myers, he would have a mask, because he's disfigured. He'd have a mask of a handsome man's face, but it would have no expression. The blank expression is what made Michael Myers so scary in that William Shatner mask, because it was a blank expression from a guy with a knife, a guy doing all this shit, but there's no face. And I thought, if he's disfigured, he wants to look normal. He's got something like that. And maybe we do vignettes where, and again, this is preposterous, but I'm not working for Bill Watts and Eddie Graham here. You see through the eye holes of the mask, like in some of the shots in Halloween, and you hear the breath inside the mask, right? And you see this room, and floor to ceiling, wall to wall, it's covered with pictures, taped and thumbtacked, of the Undertaker, like in The Omen, the drywallers downstairs, and also the priest in The Omen that was trying to protect himself from the son of Satan by putting pages from the Bible lining every inch of the wall of his room to keep the evil out. But this Kane has been fixated on his brother. And then you see through the eye holes, he's got a candle, and he's holding his hand over the candle where the flame is burning his flesh, but instead he's just holding his hand there and he's going, and then you hear Paul Bear's voice, Kane, it's time for dinner. And you hear this clack, and there he's thrown raw steaks and maggot-infested fucking bread and shit on the floor in front of Kane. You see the eye holes look down at it, and you hear Paul Bear's voice, if you don't like it, blame your brother. And then a door slams. And then fucking Kane takes the fucking candle and starts setting all the pictures of Undertaker on fire. I may have been a little ahead of my time for the WWF in 1997. But it seemed to me that that would be something that people would, think, well, there's something wrong with this fucking guy. But instead, Vince called creative services and had a superhero outfit made, red tights and red mask. And I don't know that if this guy had been held in a fucking room after being disfigured by a fire and held in solitary by a fat, evil manager for 20 years and fed garbage, that he would have time to stop by and get custom-made tights. But nevertheless, Vince likes that superhero look, and that's how Vince, as Glenn said in this episode, sold him on the look. But Kane wants to be better than The Undertaker, so he wants to look better too. Okay. What do you think? Like fucking psychopathic serial killer murder from the movies or superhero in a red cape?
I'm not into the whole raw meat thing and everything, but also the Vince McMahon explanation of it. I felt like with no explanation, it just kind of works. And as far as he goes, we talked about the gimmicks that didn't work. He was Unabomb, had a couple other little gimmicks before then. We saw him without the mask later on. I think he's a classic example of someone in wrestling who needed a mask. And actually, he's one of the great masked wrestlers. If you look at success, he was someone who worked well wearing a mask. And I thought he lost a lot when he lost it.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. And thankfully, they glossed over a lot of that period. But Vince always loves to monkey with shit. He wants to freshen shit up or monkey with it or change it or update it. That's why they switched Austin heel and he hugged him and killed the business. But when Kane took the mask off and wasn't disfigured, he shaved some bald spots in his hair or whatever, but that to me hurt. And then I liked it when they had him using the voice box thing because he had no voice because of the fire or whatever. I liked that. But when they took the mask off and he wasn't disfigured and he could speak and they just ignored, it would be like suddenly if you had the Fantastic Four, but Ben Grimm never turned into the thing because of gamma radiation. It was actually a reaction to fucking shellfish. What? You can't just change all those things that we've already been told and had assumed as fact, and then just we're completely changing it. And the same thing with The Undertaker. I didn't like the American Badass because it made him a real person, and I thought hurt the mystique of the gimmick. But when you think about it in the long run, because Undertaker got 30 years and Kane's got 25, them changing their gimmicks made the original gimmicks more over. Because nobody talks about maskless Kane doing promos. Everybody talks about the big red machine. Yeah, some people like the American Badass. And I know as Mark got to ride motorcycles and play Kid Rock music. But it made people long for The Undertaker. And when they finally gave them back Kane in the mask and gave them back The Undertaker, how can I miss you if you won't go away? The people missed them like crazy because, they didn't have it anymore and now they got it back. So I never like contradicting shit that you have said to the fans is true about anybody. I think that hurts whoever that person is. But in this case, because they'd gotten over so strong before they messed with it, and the messing didn't last incredibly long, they finally got Undertaker and Kane back as the way they remembered them, and it helped instead of hurt, if that makes any sense. And you notice that they didn't monkey with it anymore after they brought him back. But and one more thing about the Kane debut and the program there, and then we'll move on. But I'd forgotten about Kane throwing Taker in the casket and setting him on fire. Because here again was the thing. The week after the Bad Blood pay-per-view, where Kane had appeared and tombstone Taker, and boom, Shitstain in the writing meeting, okay, we'll have Kane come out and choke slam Undertaker through the announce desk on Raw. And Bruce and I both had stop, slow down. Because again, and this was about 6 months into my relationship with Shitstain. And Bruce was always friendly with him and always took his amateurishness and verbal diarrhea in much better humor than I did. But I had tried to be friendly at the start. And I thought, okay, guy's never been in the wrestling business before. He's never been in locker rooms before. He's never had any experience at any of this. He's got a lot of ideas. They've hired him. Bruce likes him. Let's see if we can teach him something, right? And then I've mentioned we went through the period where we tried to do that. And then I found out that he not only couldn't learn, but wasn't interested in learning because he had a better way of doing things. And that was nonsense and led to numerous incidents. But the one, and even Bruce had to slow down. Vince had also given us the parameters that Kane would not face The Undertaker in the ring until WrestleMania, which was the end of March, and we're now in the middle of October. So we got 5.5 months. I said, Kane has cost Undertaker a loss, but he's still his brother that he just found out that is still alive. And if we're going to go with this thing, then Undertaker, he doesn't want to fight his brother, but if Kane chokeslams Undertaker through the announce desk on Raw after he just cost him to lose a match to Shawn Michaels, now Undertaker's going to have to want to fight him, or elsewise Undertaker's a pussy. So if he chokeslams him through the fucking desk this week, how are we going to stretch the rest of this 5 months out? Idiot. So Bruce and I got Vince to agree that the method that Kane would use would be to take the animosity out on everyone else, the old let it be on your head. I'm going to, and that's why Kane didn't come out and start wrestling as in sanctioned matches immediately. As you'll remember, he would somehow, something would be happening. Some match would be going on, some interview, something would be taking place, and suddenly lights off, red lights, spooky music. Here comes Kane, and he beats up everybody, babyface, heels, referees, whatever's in his way, because he don't give a shit. And Paul Bearer is saying, we will hurt everyone, including people dear to you, until you agree to face your brother. And we were going to run that until January-ish, Rumble time, thereabouts, when then something would happen physically, or Kane would do something, and finally we'd be able to book the WrestleMania match. Well, of course, that worked until then by mid-December or there, or we did the timeline somewhere. I'm off the creative team. Shitstain's gone and buried me behind my back after hours. Bruce was already being transitioned into the office because I'm sure he was doing the same thing to him. We found out through court depositions and documents that Shitstain buries everybody behind their back he's working with. So me and Bruce are gone, and they bring Fatback Ferrara in to carry Shitstain's papers because Ferrara had never been in the wrestling business before, had no idea what he was doing, and he got hired to be Shitstain's assistant so Shitstain could act like he was important. And then you had the blind leading the fat. So, point I was making on this is pertains to this program, they couldn't even just do an angle. This was supposed to be and turned out to be a multi-year program between Undertaker and Kane. And we knew that. That's why we didn't want to, I don't know, burn people alive as the first angle. As soon as me and Bruce are off creative, what was it, January, about Rumble time, Kane and Paul Bearer throw Undertaker in the fucking casket and set it on fire on live TV. And Undertaker goes away to fucking, across the river Styx into the land of the dead until WrestleMania or whatever. But thankfully, the personalities were so strong, even Shitstain and his shit assistant couldn't fuck it up. But that was the battle that we were fighting constantly was, can we just have them have a match first before they resort to cremation? But anyway, then they followed the Undertaker and Kane program on the bio here, or the rivals here through the years. They were opponents, they were partners, they were brothers of destruction. And now one is a retired motivational speaker and the other is the crackpot right-wing mayor of poor Knoxville, who's against people being able to control the amount of children they have and wants people to have a lot of guns and thinks that the orange dipshit should have been in office. So everybody lets you down in the end. Final thoughts on this program, Brian?
I kind of zoned out by the end of it because I feel like I've seen this before. You know what I mean? Like, we just watched the Undertaker thing. So after, 2006, when they got to that point, I was like, okay, I don't think I need to see too much more of this.
Yeah.
After the Undertaker's return at WrestleMania, where he had the gimmick back, and they brought Paul Bearer out again. And other than that,
there you go.
Yeah, I think some fans may be disappointed in some of the content, either in the rival show or maybe here this week. But of course, we do have some questions. But if you are disappointed at WWE, not us, you may want to look to sue.
There's always the option of litigation. And if you feel that you have been cheated in some way, you have buyer's remorse because the product has been misrepresented like the WWE product often is, or you feel in some way that you have been harmed because you've been lied to and haven't been given the straight story about historical facts, sometimes like the WWE does. I'm not sure that's illegal, but you can sue for it anyway. And I know the man that you can call.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue their ass.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and he will sue their ass on your behalf. So you will be assing or he will be assing on your behalf. That's what he'll be doing. We had Stephen on the program a couple of weeks ago, and he gave some great advice. A lot of the listeners came in and wrote in, emailed in, Twittered in, and said that was very perceptive of a legal expert to break down some of the issues involving Vince McMahon. And they said that was very perceptive of a legal expert to break down some of the issues that wrestlers can be sued for by fans. You know who didn't get in touch with us, Brian? Any wrestlers that actually said, you know what? I'm an idiot. I didn't know all these things until you guys and Stephen P. New talked about them. And now I'm going to modify my behavior so I don't spend the rest of my life working for some fat plumber or paying for his children to go through medical school because I was so stupid that I injured them in the course of doing my phony wrestling. We didn't hear from any of those wrestlers. They didn't learn a thing. But folks, regular people like you can, if you have been wrongfully terminated, if your health has been damaged by other people's negligence, if you've had an accident and nobody wants to own up responsibility and make you whole again, as they say, if any of these things apply to you and so many more, and you need someone to navigate you through the treacherous, shark-infested legal waters of the American jurisprudence system, even if you want to sue drywallers for making noise while you're recording a podcast, call Stephen P. New at 888-692-8084 or log on to New, that's N-E-W, newlawoffice.com, and you will be immediately referred to the man, the myth, the legend that has won almost $100 million in judgments for his clients during his legal career, and you could be next. Just like Ric Flair used to say to the women in the front row in any arena, you can't be first, but you can be next.
In line to sue. Yes. In line to sue Ric Flair. You could be next.
Well, you could be. Well, I thought you meant you could be in line to fuck Stephen P. New, but see, those things are switched. You could be next in line to fuck Flair, or you could be next in line for Stephen to sue you or to sue someone on your behalf.
The life that Ric Flair in many ways pretended to have is the life that Stephen P. New really has. He really does. He really is a jet flying
limousine riding, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing.
He's the real Flair.
He's a writ writing son of a gun.
There you go. You see?
And I'll tell you what, he's been writing writs all morning. If you've read the writs he's written, you'll know they're really well written writs.
Where did
Stephen P. New.
Where did you first hear that?
Where did I first heard it the first time I said it.
Oh, you came up with that? That wasn't like something?
That's mine. Okay. No, that's mine. Thank you very much.
I never know if it's Green Acres or something else.
Oh, no. That's mine. Because, well, here's the thing. It was Clarence Mason, right? Was that the first one? He was the first lawyer I used it on, I think. Or maybe it was in Smoke. I can't remember. But what does a lawyer do? A lawyer writes writs. Well, what do you do with a writ? You read a writ. Well, if I'm reading the writs that he's written, then I would know that they're really well. And I like alliteration. What can I say?
Well, it's such a good line that I thought it was off 60s TV, if that's an ultimate compliment for you.
That's the ultimate compliment. I'll take that compliment. And you take my advice, ladies and gentlemen. newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. Get Stephen P. New started writing writs.